tonight we're going to show you how they were built. We've actually found the devices that were used to build them. I don't know how many of you have been to Egypt. A few. Okay. Then you know where the sun boat is. Off to the side of the Great Pyramid. Well, when they excavated that, they found these extra timbers that, try as they might, just simply would not fit on the sun boat. So they put them in storage, and later on, when we were able to figure out through the study of hieroglyphics how they were built, we made working models, went over to Egypt. They were nice enough to give us a permit. We put it on the middle pyramid, lifted a few things up and down the side of the pyramid, convinced the head of archaeology that this was how it was done. So they let us have a look at those machines or devices that they had stashed away. And it turns out that sure enough these were a set of the originals. And then in King Tut's tomb, he had a miniature set. Quite often in tombs they wouldn't have a full-size set. So anyway, we've been able to find out how that was done, and we'll share that with you this evening. Also, up at Ballarat in Lebanon, there's some unbelievably large stones. These weigh half a million pounds. And that has been quite a mystery as to how folks move those around. Now, I may be mistaken, but judging from the massive stones that we find in South America, in Lebanon, in Egypt, that, and stone edifices and just simply large stones, that at some point in time that must have been a feather in their hat to be able to do something with a larger stone, either cut it out, move it some distance or whatever. Of course, all of you are familiar with Stonehenge. In England, those are not massive, but they're quite interesting. And then someone I met here said that there's a place similar to Stonehenge somewhere in Australia. And I don't know if we'll have time to have a look at that, but I certainly would like to have a look at that if there is such a place. Anyway, I guess the beginnings of archaeology date back to the time of a businessman from Germany by the name of Schliemann. He had been reading, what is it, the Iliad or the other book? There's two of those, by Homer. And it told all about Troy and the battle for that city. And most everyone had assumed that this was just a mythical, or rather, a bit of fiction. But he became convinced that it was a little more than fiction. Quite often in fiction, they don't go into such great details as Homer went into in writing this. And so Schliemann, when he made his fortune, decided that he would go have a look. So he went over to Turkey, to where the part of the ancient people lived that built that city and participated in the Trojan War and started digging. And sure enough, he found several levels of an ancient city. Now, you and I, if something gets destroyed or burnt down or whatever, we kind of remove the rubble and start from bedrock, to build the new structure that we intend to build. In ancient times, they didn't do that. They would just come in and level off what was left of the previous city, whatever, and then build right on top of it. So when you dig these tells, which is the name that archaeologists have applied to these heaps of rubble, you're able to dig down through several layers of habitation. And of course it's quite interesting to see how these people lived and to try to figure out who they were. But anyway, the Schliemann was able to find Troy to everyone's satisfaction. And that is no minor miracle, because few archaeologists want to agree with their competitors when they consider any other archaeologist competition. But everybody pretty well decided that he hit it right on, spot on, I guess, as people stated. And he found a treasure that he called King Hiram's treasure. And it was a very impressive lot of jewelry and gold and precious stones and this sort of thing. So that kind of, shall we say, got him quite excited. So off he went to find the place that the Greek kings that came to attack Troy in the Aegean area. And he was able to dig up some things, Agamemnon and others. So he basically got archaeology off to a running start. And I read all of these stories, and to be perfectly honest, it got me rather excited. There wasn't too many places left by the time I got to the point where I could afford to do archaeological excavation.
No.
As far as
No, not at all. And actually we're having trouble with equipment.
but we did manage.
And we also had trouble with ticketing, so we ended up getting them in there.
Most people are quite
People went to the wrong car parks and things have happened, but order will come out of chaos. I know, it happened on the first night. Order will come out of chaos.
Some people are born to greatness. Others achieve it by hard work, and others have it thrust upon them. Well, archaeology kind of got these discoveries that we'll share in the next few evenings kind of got thrust upon me, basically. I was reading in Reader's Digest in 1960, also in Life magazine, and saw this boat-shaped object in an aerial survey photograph. And a photogrammetry expert by the name of Dr. Brandenburg had evaluated this thing by a stereoplanograph device. And this simply is a device that takes pictures that have been taken from aircraft, and they mount cameras in the wings, at the wings and the tail and the nose and in the middle of the plane, so that they get 5 shots of this, whatever it is below. And so they project these in this wild 7 stereoplanograph machine, and it gives you a 3D dimensional picture of whatever's down there. So he said that's a boat. And he gave the dimensions of it, which was in excess of 500 feet. And now, when our crew gets here and everything's said, feel free to interrupt me at any time there. Yeah. So anyway, the fact that he thought it was a boat, and he had actually been among the people that went out to investigate it in 1960, and he measured it on the ground and made the statement that what he saw close up proved that what he had theorized from this 3D dimensional photograph was accurate, and he was quite certain it was a boat. So the fact that it was over 500 feet long interested me, and the fact also that it was 6,300 feet up in the mountains of Ballarat. That was quite interesting. In ancient times, people would take boats rivers, and when they ran into rapids or falls or some natural obstruction, they would trundle the boat around it. And that is, they'd lay logs down and drag this boat over them. When they got past the log on the end, somebody can grab it and run around and put it in front. This is the same method they use to move large stones, by the way. But this trundling, and by doing that, they were able to bypass falls and rapids and things, and then get back to the river when it got navigable again. But this boat was way beyond the size that it had ever been trundled anywhere. Now, a lot of archaeologists who were looking for Noah's Ark, and I think you're all familiar with the fact that there's no end of Noah's Ark stories. As a matter of fact, as a special favor, I asked my friends to never introduce me to someone on the street or one of their friends as the guy that found Noah's Ark. It creates a rather stressful encounter because they don't want to say, oh, another one of those idiots. And of course, I don't want to like the looks I get from most people. But anyway, these people, most of these folks have assumed that because the Bible was written in Hebrew, the part that tells about Noah's Ark, that they used the Hebrew cubit when they said cubit. As a matter of fact, Moses was educated in Egypt, and he used the Royal Egyptian cubit, which was 20.6 inches, and 300 of those are 515 feet. So anyway, they were looking for a 450 foot long boat, and I was looking for a 515 foot boat, and Dr. Brandenberger found it for me. Well, some people got out there well before I did. As a matter of fact, they went out in 1960, had a look at it, and they had heard the story of the Russian pilot and the story of Hagopian and the story of, several other people that had indicated that the ark was almost intact, maybe had a hole in the side or the top. So when they saw this, they said, this can't be it. As a matter of fact, a fellow who had a tele-evangelist program wanted to go out there, lean up against the side of Noah's Ark and say, we're bringing today's program to you from the legendary Ark of Noah. Bless his heart, there wasn't much to lean up against. And so they blew 3 holes in the side of it, called a news conference and said that it was nothing of archaeological interest, that it was just some strange geological phenomenon, and off they went. Well, bless their hearts, I was able to use where they had blown those holes in there to get some real good samples to have analyzed in 1977 when we went out to investigate the site. And also in the bottom of some of these blast holes was some petrified wood. When I got ready to go out there, or was getting ready, I called these people and talked with them. And I didn't know how to get right to the object, and that's rather important out in those mountains in eastern Turkey, because, shall we say, if you don't know right where to go, or you're not fortunate enough to fall over it, you never find it. So I was told to them that they got on horseback and devised it. If you have problems remembering names, just remember the dough bicep, okay? Now, I don't know if dough is a sling for money here in Australia or not, but in America it is, so that helped me remember the name of that place. But anyway, they got on horseback and rode for 6 hours to get to the boat. Well, that could be almost anywhere out in those mountains. And the other half of them said they got on horseback at the Iranian border and rode for 6 hours. So there wasn't much, that wasn't a great deal of help. But all of them thought I was rather lacking in the computer section, or even wanting to go out and have a look did run across some rather strange looking stones out there. They said they looked like building timbers or something, but they weren't wood, they were just plain stone. Well, bless their hearts, if you read in Genesis chapter 2, you find that there was no rain upon the earth before the flood. Instead, a mist went up from the ground and watered the face of the earth. So this tells us that the conditions that produced growth rains were not present prior to the flood. Drought or cold weather, cold enough so that the sap no longer can flow or does flow. These are the things that produce growth rains, and that was not the case prior to the flood. It seems that this planet was a very nice terrarium up until the flood, and at that point things changed. So it turns out that this was petrified wood. Didn't have the growth rings, and they didn't recognize it as petrified wood. So they did the excavating for me and made life real easy for me there in the early stages of the investigation. And of course I appreciate that. Now, as to these stories about Noah's Ark, the story about the Russian pilot, there's a fellow in Los Angeles back in the late 40s. He decided that he wanted to start up a successful newspaper. And I'm not talking about, your normal daily newspapers that are published around our cities, but he wanted to start something up like the National Enquirer, the Globe, or one of these things we call a rag mag nowadays. And so it turns out that he had a Polish neighbor. Well, he rearranged this fellow's name a bit and turned him into a Russian pilot and wrote this whole story. It's a creation of fiction. And in the last 10 years, whoever gets in the newspaper or on the telly, having looked for Noah's Ark, he sends them an apology. We have one. David Fassel got one. John Morris got one. Let's see, who's the thing? Schnelling, I believe, Schnelling of the creation science people here. Doesn't like me, bless his heart, for some reason. Never met the man. But anyway, he got one of these letters. But these folks keep telling this story. For some reason they like it. It's part of what convinces people to shell out money so they can go look at the boat on Mount Ararat. Well, another thing they overlook is that Mount Ararat is a post-flood volcanic mountain. And of course, wooden boats don't do well on volcanoes. And then another consideration, if the mountain wasn't there, he couldn't very well have landed on it. And what amazes me is that people that are much better looking, richer, and obviously a great deal cleverer than I am go off looking in places where it can't be and leave it to, guys like myself to, shall we say, do the documentation. And that amazes me considerably. But anyway, I'm not complaining. Now, something that I would like to share with you, in Ephesians, I'm thinking that it may be in the first chapter and around the 8th or 9th verses, says something to the effect that in the dispensation of fullnesses of times, God subdued all things unto himself in Christ Jesus. All right, and I recommend that you look that text up. Now, I'm not 100% on that being the right one. I do have a Franklin Bible, though, and given time I can relocate it. But what this tells us is that God has all these things on a schedule. So it has nothing to do with the intelligence or the skill or any of these other considerations. It has to do with God's timing as to when these things are revealed. And so that, of course, is why these people in 1960 decided this was not of archaeological interest. Now, I don't want to tell you too much about Noah's Ark because that's the subject we're going to show you a video on this evening. You know, we have folks that have been taught to believe things other than the history that's recorded in the Bible. And I don't pick on these folks. Shall we say, we do like to point out a few facts, because any of us could have been just like them if we had been born to the same family, sent to the same schools, and studied the same material. So we don't have bragging rights or anything of that nature. As a matter of fact, I tell people, you know, sometimes I'm invited to a church and I have a look back at the audience, and here we have all these wonderful self-righteous people looking down their nose at everybody else, and I say things like, how many of y'all stopped off at the cemetery and resurrected a few people on your way in today? You know, or stopped by the hospital and healed a few people? And they look at me like I'm crazy, but shall we say, I like for all of us to realize that it's a matter of where we were born and how we were taught as to what we believe at this point in time. And we could have been Hindus or Buddhists or whatever if we'd just been born somewhere else. So we need to be kind to folks that have different opinion. But looking at the facts, now someone pointed out to me the other day that the Aboriginals have been here in Australia, I forget the exact number of years, but I think it's something like 140,000 years, you know, in their literature or whatever. I don't think they necessarily believe that, but the experts who examine the artifacts and the paintings and all of this come up with that conclusion. Well, folks, if that were true, we would be in old boomerangs and spears and ostrich shells and other leavings of these people up to right about here somewhere. I mean, think about it, you know, and that's the fact. In America, we'd be up to that level in Indian arrowheads and tomahawks and all this sort of thing. Now, people do make babies, you know. And back before TV, they made a whole lot more than they do now. And so we would have had, we'd be up to our necks in leavings of people of that nature if time had gone on for that length of time. So we try to be realistic about these things. And we have videos. We won't have any tonight. We'll have them tomorrow night after the program. We do have order sheets here. If someone's here tonight and won't be back, you know, during the rest of the week to pick up a video should you want one, these will be on the tables out front, and please help yourself to that. I think I saw my friend John disappear back there. We're going to do questions here right away, John, so if you'll find your way up here, we'll start that. Meanwhile, there's a lot of stories, once again, about Noah's Ark having been seen on Mount Ararat. Before I was able to go out there, I read all of these accounts, and it turns out that there's 31 people saw Noah's Ark in 31 different locations on Mount Ararat. Well, I had a little bit of a problem with that because I don't think Noah's Ark gets moved around that often. And sometimes I wonder about people, you know. Isn't it kind of hard to believe that somebody would just make up a whopper and lay it on you for no good reason? I find find it extremely difficult, but the evidence seems to indicate that there are those among us who are willing to do that. And I think a lot of them focus their attention on Noah's Ark for quite a spell. So anyway, tonight maybe we can try to answer a few of your questions on this subject. John, will you help us out?
Ladies and gentlemen, let me just lay down a couple of guidelines here. What we're going to do now, obviously, is to give you the opportunity to ask questions. We're not promising that Ron can answer every question. Unfortunately, he's not omniscient, otherwise I'd have a lot of questions for him. But we are prepared to field any questions you have. There are, however, just a couple of rules. First of all, let me just ask, how many people have got questions? You can just show of hands would help. I see 1, 2, all right, there's 1 or 2, okay. What we want to do is to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions. We've set aside a time period of at least 15 minutes for question time. However, if you would please respect a couple of rules, what I would like is please ask one question at a time. And then once everybody's had a chance to ask a question, if you've got a second or third question, then we'll come back to you. But we just want to make sure that everybody gets the opportunity who wants to ask a question. That, of course, means then that your question should not include words like and, next, including, any conjunction that's trying to put two questions into one. Also, we don't have a microphone to bring to you, so I'm going to ask you, if you've got a question when I recognise you, please stand up and state your question very concisely and clearly. I'm pretty much used to the Australian accent, so I should be able to do any translation that may be necessary. So, let me ask you, let's see the hand if somebody's got a question. All right, first one down here, please.
I was just wondering, have you and Marty worked out a sort of guesstimate date of the flood?
Yes, ma'am. We'll repeat the question so that if you behind the speaker didn't hear it, so you can. The question is, has Marty and I worked out an approximate date for the flood? And we do our chronological, shall we say, investigations based on biblical chronology. Right? I have seen absolutely no reason to believe that it's not correct. And at my age, I promise you, I have read about everything, that's been written on that subject and a few others. I didn't remember all of it. I got a sieve for a brain, but a couple of things hung on there some way. All right? 2348 BC is the day that the flood, and that should be extremely close. Thank you. Yes?
I was just wondering, what do the Christianity of churches all around the world think of your discovery? Do they believe it or they skeptical?
Okay, thanks. He's wondering what different churches and Christians around the world think of our research and these discoveries. And the answer to that is that some of these people are smarter than you folks are here tonight, if I may say so. You see, they say that it is absolutely impossible for one man to find all of these things, so they don't bother inviting me to have a look. You see what I mean? Now, everybody that does, of course, goes away a believer in the discoveries. Now, they don't necessarily care that much about me, but anyway, they're quite happy with the discoveries. So we can't help folks that are unwilling to see, all right? And some of these people, they will call the experts and say, what do you think? And the experts, of course, will say, well, Ron Wyatt's a kook. And he claims to have found the very rock that Cain hit Abel in the head with. And so you can't pay any attention to him. Well, bless their hearts, it doesn't say what Cain hit Abel in the head with. And so, speaking of these that just make up and lay a whopper on you, the experts quite often do that when they don't have any evidence to, shall we say, prove that you're mistaken or that I'm mistaken. So those who watch the evidences are very happy with them and share them with their neighbors and friends. Those who won't look, they keep on thinking I'm a kook, and they may be partially right.
Okay, let's go across to this side. Okay, right there.
One on the ark, the belief, the ark is supposed to be made out of gopher wood.
Yes, sir.
How come so much iron is used?
All righty. Let me ask you a question. Do you live in a brick house or a wooden house? Wooden house. Okay. So you don't have any plumbing in the house. You don't have any electric wiring in the house. There's no nails in there, no screens, no brick, no concrete floor. It's just wood. You get the point? The iron foundries, well, from before the flood, they all got trashed, I'm sure, so we couldn't locate them. But right after the flood, they set up one. Well, don't shake your head until you hear me out. All right? Let's be fair. I'm being fair with you. So anyway, there's a foundry right near Noah's Ark where they made iron and brass and even glass. And it dates right back to, when Noah got off the boat. And in Genesis chapter 4, verse 22, it says that Tubal-Cain was an instructor in metallurgy, in iron and brass. He was fourth generation from Adam. The flood occurred in the 10th generation, and the Bible tells us that these people lived in excess of 900 years. So just imagine Edison or Alexander Graham Bell or some of those other guys having 900 years, And so it's not amazing that these space-age metals had been developed and were used on the boat. You see, gopher wood simply means laminated wood. It's the word gopher is derived from the Aramaic term, which means to stack or to laminate, multiple thicknesses. In fact, in Britain, back when they started pleating skirts, ladies' skirts, the machine that made all those neat little folds was called a gophering machine because it stacked them. And so it was made of laminated wood. However, it had to hold the wood together by some means, just like at your house. And so it had these metals in there. Now, since these metals are right in the middle of a fossilized boat, we can't conclude that somebody went out there 3 or 4 years ago and made this thing and put these space-age metals on there, because everything that they're in is fossilized. And while it doesn't take 1 million years for wood to petrify, it does take considerable amount of time. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that question. Let's see. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, John.
Phoenician mythology also tells a similar tale to the Noah's Ark tale. Dates at about 2,000 years before the Ark story. And it all runs basically to the same level. Is it possible then that your Ark may not be the Ark? It could be from the Phoenician tale.
All right, thanks. Appreciate that. Well, basically, there's not too many boats laying around on the mountainsides, in the mountains of Ararat, where the Bible says the ark landed. And folks, bear in mind that people that ask questions are not necessarily stating something because they don't believe something. It may be because they just want to clarify a point, and they figure other folks may be too bashful to ask those kinds of questions. So, I appreciate those kinds of questions. Now, what you're talking about is the Epic of Gilgamesh, a Babylonian story that involves a fellow with the name of Utnapishtim. Now, how would you like to have had that moniker? It might be very effective for a prize fighter. Imagine the teasing they would get. But anyway, there's no evidence that this story predated the Bible record at all. Evolutionists say this, but it's not true. In the Ark of the Covenant, which we will present what we're allowed to Wednesday evening,
Tuesday.
On the back, Tuesday evening, I'm sorry. Yeah. People just just wind me up and put me out here. I'm never quite sure what day it is or where I am. Anyway, on the back side of Noah's Ark, and I'm not going to touch any buttons here, there's a nice receptacle that the original books of Moses are in, right? When we're allowed to show those to the public with their translation, that'll wipe out all of these theories that the Jewish Bible record came from older documents, okay? But thanks, that's a good question. And all the rest are too, by the way. But yes, sir.
Would you help me out a little bit misunderstand some of it? When will you be able to dig down to the boat, or the fossilized boat?
Okay. Now, when are we going to be able to excavate the boat and make it a little more visible? We may not get to do that. Now, I made arrangements with an outfit in Great Britain that build 5-star hotels around the world. The Turkish government authorized me to tell whoever would, build some hotels out there, pay for the excavation and housing of Noah's Ark, that the land would be free for 99 years. So anyway, we were able to persuade some people to do that. However, when you do something in Turkey, you have to have a Turkish partner. And these people sent $6 million to Turkey, transferred it into a Turkish bank, and their Turkish partner grabbed it and made off with it. So that put an end to that effort. We set up another one with United Airlines. They had $3 million in reserves, and they wanted to invest it in a manner that would guarantee future income. And so they were quite excited about the idea of doing this art thing with some hotels. And we had a structural steel outfit in Memphis, Tennessee that was going to provide the steel. And anyway, Black Monday came along a few years back and wiped out that $3 million reserve, so that went down the tube. The next thing, Dr. Alan Roberts, who I think most of you have heard the name, who Ian Plimer sued, and David Fassel, and all of that. But anyway, he and I went to British Aerospace, and they were quite keen on doing this also. But about the time we were going out there, a couple of things happened that we found rather discouraging. One was we were taken hostage by the Kurdish terrorists for 21 days and nights, and that, shall we say, dampened our ardor for working out in that part of the world. And then British Aerospace, their stockholders had a proxy fight and booted out the people that were going to do this and put in new officers and sold off Land Rover, that part of the company. So that went down the tube, and I just hadn't had the heart to go out and try to get something else together. But seriously, I believe that God requires a bit of faith from us. And I believe that He provides more than enough evidence to convince honest people of the realities of Noah's Ark and the other things that you'll see here today. But He is wise enough to know that if somebody does not want to believe something, that you cannot pile up enough evidence to get them to say, that agree that something is what they don't want it to be. And so I believe that this is what is happening. Now, I'm perfectly willing that if God provides the money and a bunch of young helpers to do most of the work, now that I'm getting older and kind of, hobbled up a bit, then I'd be glad to go out there and do that. But I don't think it would really make any difference. I think that people that don't believe what they see here wouldn't believe, like one fellow put it, they wouldn't believe it, even though they found a bronze plaque in there that said, "Build Noah's shipyard."
Okay, next question.
I believe it states in the Bible that the boat was to be coated inside and out with pitch, which I understand is just tar. If the boat was laminated, do you think that it would have maybe said in the Bible that it was also to be laminated in between with pitch or something like that? And also, have you done any analysis on the substance that actually holds the laminated layers together to see whether it is some sort of ancient sort of pitch or resin?
Okay, thank you. What he's asking, or he was saying that in the Bible it says it was pitched within and without with pitch. He believes that to be some sort of tar. And the other question was, why wouldn't it have stated in the Bible that it was laminated if indeed that were true? Well, bless your heart, it took me about 20 more years than it took you to get real forgetful. And gophering means laminated. You remember just a minute ago we discussed that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You don't mind me jerking your chain just a little bit. Thanks. What we found out there is that the boat, inside and out, is covered with amber, okay? And that's a type of resin. And you're right, it does state that. And of course, resin, when it petrifies or fossilizes, it becomes amber. And all of the timbers that haven't been exposed to the weather and erosion and that sort of thing for a long enough time, they are coated with about 1/4 inch of this amber. And so that's another proof to me, at least, that it's the right boat.
Okay.
Ron, you earlier made reference to alleged sighting of the ark by Russian pilots during World War I. Reference is very same thing between in the Hart and Morris book on the ark on Ballarat.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a number of the stories in the same book alleged to various sightings of the ark right in 1956 through the 1970s and beyond. If what you have found is actually the ark itself and non-furry analyze, if that is so the case, then does one simply dismiss all these various all these alleged sightings?
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir. He's pointing out that many people persist in telling the story about the Russian pilot and about other sightings. All right. Now, and he mentioned John Morris in particular. He's the president of ICR, that's Institute for Creation Research, and that's out of San Diego, California, or La Jolla, California, somewhere there. And do I recommend that you just dismiss all of these claims? And yes, I do. That's exactly what I did. The reason being that all of these people were about to take a picture and a cloud came in, or they were about to take a picture and fell in a hole. The end result is that there is no evidence of anything being on Mount Ararat. And a very dear friend of mine, who is now deceased as of 1991, Jim Irwin, Colonel Jim Irwin, the astronaut on Apollo 15, or one of the astronauts, he scoured Mount Ararat. He went all over the ice cap and down around where something would have fell if it had thawed out of the ice, or, as the ice extrudes down and melts. And he stated in 1986 that there was nothing on Mount Ararat, nothing. And then in 1988, he was able to hire a helicopter with supercharger so they could fly high enough to photograph the entire mountain. God provided them 3 days of absolutely clear weather, and you don't get that on Mount Ararat, but they got it that year. And so they photographed every square inch of it, took it back to Colorado Springs, and he, blew this up, enlarged it, checked it very thoroughly, and said there's absolutely nothing. So since that time, we have people coming along who founded their own university in their spare bedroom and issued themselves a PhD degree that say that they were the ones that hired the helicopter and flew around the mountain, and they saw laminated timber and cut a piece out of it. The piece of laminated timber that they show is one they stole from me. And so, this is the kind of thing that goes on. Now, I don't know if this aired here in Australia or not. Oh, we got some time. All right. Back in America about 3 years ago, or maybe 4, the older I get, the faster time, whips by. CBS put on a 2-hour live special on that had to do with the search for Noah's Ark. They called me and wanted to use our video and photographs and our wood samples and all of this sort of thing. A guy by the name of Wyatt, and he was the producer of this. And I said, well, how do you plan to present this? He says, well, we're going to present it just like it is, but we're going to say that it was found on top of Mount Ararat. I said, well, in that case, you don't get to use my stuff. So I picked up my marbles and went home. But anyway, I said, they offered us a fair sum of money. In fact, I've been offered $4 billion for the Ark of the Covenant. We decided that God may take a dim view of me selling that, and that would not be good for my health. But I wouldn't do it anyway, to be honest, and I think you probably realize that. Anyway, there was an actor by the name of Jamal out in California, and he had a friend who was a producer, and by the name of LaRue. Now, back when I was a kid, there was a hero. There was Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, and Lash LaRue. And this fellow, I think, is his grandson. So he's a producer out there. These two guys got together and decided they'd pull a fast one on creationists. Okay? And so anyway, Jamal went out near where he lived to a railroad switching yard and chopped out a piece of cross tie. Now, I don't know if your railroads here use wooden cross ties or metal ones, but in the States they use wooden ones. And he chopped a plug of that out, so he got 2 flat surfaces here and a sawed-off end. He took this to his apartment, put it in a saucepan, poured in teriyaki sauce and wine and a few other things, and he cooked this thing until it turned real black and got, like your hands do when you do a bunch of dishes and all of this. It got old looking. And then he pulls it out with a pair of tongs, what you get boiled corn out of a hot pan with. Used that, pulled the thing up and blew dried it with his hair dryer till he got it just right. And then he videoed all of this, by the way. And he went to Wyatt and told him his story. Now, he read John Morris's book, the one you're speaking of there, and studied the maps and all of that. He's an actor. That's what he does for a living, is study scripts or whatever else and then repeats them. So he went to Wyatt, and he said that he and a friend had gone out to Turkey in 1985, and that they had run into some Kurdish men who took them to Noah's Ark. And they went inside. There were all kinds of stalls in there and just, all kinds of goodies. And he photographed all of it very carefully. And by the way, he got this piece of wood out of there. Showed him the piece of wood. And then he said when they came out of the boat, he wanted a wide-angle picture so he could, maybe find his way back to it at another time. And so he asked his friend to take a picture of him by this hole where they went in. His friend got to backing up and got too close to the edge of the mountain, fell off, and he and the camera died. So that was the reason he had no pictures, just a chunk of wood. And that sounds reminiscent of a whole lot of stories about Noah's Ark, as to why they don't have any pictures. But anyway, he laid that on Cellier, and I guess Cellier smelled a rat, so he says, you need to go and find a recognized authority on Noah's Ark and share this with them, and if they will vouch for your, this being reality, he says, I'll put it in my movie, in my 2-hour special. So he went to John Morris, and he laid this story on John. Well, John was just thrilled to death, because bless his heart, he loves all these Ark stories, and he repeats every one of them, even though there's absolutely no proof, and that's tragic. John's otherwise a very nice fellow, but he doesn't have a whole lot of credibility anymore. But he did then. So he went to Cellier, and he said, I will stake my reputation on the fact that this wood came from Noah's Ark and that Jamal is telling the truth. So Cellier included this segment in his Noah's Ark special. Well, after it aired, Jamal called a news conference, and he set up his video player and all of this and showed them where the wood came from, and said he had never been to Turkey in his entire life. And the journalist wanted to know, why on earth did you do this then? He said, I just wanted to show how gullible creationists are. And so guess what? All of the evolutionists say, and I quote, the man who is by far the most thorough, knowledgeable, and all of this of all creationists was made an absolute fool of by this Jamal. Okay? Well, if he was all that clever, why didn't he catch it? But I hope you get the drift here. Whoever makes a fool of themselves, they were the best of the lot. Well, thank goodness that's not really the case. But anyway, these journalists then asked John Morris, why did you vouch for this fellow? And he said, well, I didn't think he would lie to me. Well, now let me ask you something. Would it not have been more appropriate for John to ask Jamal to show him his passport and show him his Turkish visa before he repeated the story that this man told him? All right? That's what you call due diligence. And he didn't do his due diligence and made all of us look, shall we say, and smell like a kicked skunk. So that wasn't that good a deal. But this is why you can't believe any of these stories, because there's not one shred of evidence in any of them. And the boat is at the other site with tons of evidence. And by the way, we take tours over and show you to Israel, Egypt, and Jordan, and show you things there, like Sodom and Gomorrah, which you will get to see here on video tomorrow night if you decide to show up. And let me say, we'd be glad to have you. None of you brought any overripe vegetation to throw at me, so you're more than welcome to come back tomorrow and the rest of the week. Any more questions?
Okay, let's see. Do we have any more? I just want to see how many we've got, first of all. 1, 2, 3, 4.
If you've had one, just wait until the others get a chance, please. Thanks.
Right, okay. I'm going to do a sweep from this side and come across to you. So, as you see questions being finished answered, please raise your hand so I can see you. And we're going to try and do it if we can within 5 minutes.
goat herder who was...
That's the Hagopian story. Yes, sir.
And I was supposed, the boy was supposed to go on down inside and brought something out of a piece of wood.
Right.
And the other question is, have you been inside and have a look?
Okay. Now, you know you weren't allowed to ask me, but as punishment, you'll have to come back next night, tomorrow night, and ask another question. Anyway, this is known as the George Hagopian story. The story is that he lived near Mount Ararat and helped his uncle herd the sheep. Now, these young kids out there do practically all of the work. Between them and the women, the men are a sorry lot. You know, and let that opportunity get away. So anyway, the way the story is that one afternoon, the kid decided that, you know, asked his uncle about Noah's Ark, and his uncle said, well, hey, I know right where it is. How about we just go have a look? So off they went up the mountain. No camera. And a gun and a knife. Okay? And they didn't want to show up at a knife fight with, at a gunfight with only a knife, so they took both. But anyway, they climbed the mountain, piled a pile of rocks up by the side of this thing. The uncle fired his musket into the side of it. The bullet hit, flattened out, slid down. All right? And the kid went up on top, and there was a hole, and he looked down and saw all of these chambers and whatnot. I've never heard the version where he actually got something out of it. So that's a little addition. You know, when people tell stories, everybody's got to add a little. So it, oh, okay. I believe you. And I won't even check your passport. But anyway, when they came down off the boat, his uncle took his knife and carved a piece of the wood from the boat. This is the one that the musket ball flattened out on and slid down. He carved a chunk of it out. They piled up a bunch of rocks. There's no rocks up on top of the mountain. That's pure ice, no rocks at all until you get down at the lower edges of the glaciers. They did all of this in one afternoon, and it takes skilled mountain climbers 3 days to get to the top. So I ask you, what do you think? Thank you. Oh, well, I drilled a hole. The other question was, have I been in it? On our radar, we were able to find an empty chamber that was close to the side, okay? So I drilled a core drill in there, fixed me a raking device that folded in on itself until it got through the hole and then popped out. And we raked some stuff up to the edge of the hole. My wife reached in and retrieved them. She's a brave lady. You'll see if you keep coming Tuesday night, you'll get to see how brave she is, actually. But anyway, we brought out animal hair, human hair. By the way, one person on Noah's Ark was a redhead, just for curiosity. We took all of this stuff to the police forensics laboratory, who specialize in the identification of fibers and hair, and they said it was an extinct rodent, the animal hair was, and that the human hair was probably something like 4,000 years old, and because of the degree to which it was hollow, it seems that whatever is inside the shaft of the hair tends to go away over a period of time. We brought out fossilized animal droppings, and my careful observation of what they looked like after my friend Ron Smith back here took me to the zoo where I saw some kangaroo droppings, is that it's probably kangaroo droppings. But these were fossilized. We also found an antler and were able to get a part of the base of it out. And so anyway, we haven't gone in, but the radar shows that there's enough voids in there, or empty chambers, that one could make a passage all the way through and outside. You'd have to, clear some debris and stuff away. The possibility exists, but we don't want to open it up because the locals would go through it and nothing would be left. So we plugged that hole and, hoped for the best, and the last I knew nobody had gone in or enlarged the hole and gone in. Thank you. Good question.
That was 4 of the 5 minutes. So, again, we keep the questions short and the answers.
Yes.
500 feet is extremely large ship.
Right.
To be floating around, going around the ocean, and with their metallurgy that they have, is it possible that the ship
All right, he's asking if it was possible that the ship was powered, had a motor or sailed or something of that nature. There's no evidence that that's the case. We found some giant anchor stones, which you saw. It's our belief that this was, the boat basically just floated around. However, these drogue stones, by being lowered off the back end of the boat, are being attached to the back end of the boat so they would raise up when the boat raised up. I'm a lazy guy, and I can't imagine Noah struggling with these big things, getting them up on the boat so he could drop them over when he could just tie them to the boat, leave them on the ground, and let the boat and water lift them. But anyway, positioned at the back of the boat, it would keep the nose into the waves, right? And so if it had been under power, they would not have needed this system. So I believe that it was not under power.
Okay. Yes, young lady here. Yeah.
What would you say to critics who say that Noah's Ark possibly existed, you can get all the animals up the ark, and you can possibly people to feed and all that sort of stuff?
All right. What would I say to the critics that say you couldn't get all the animals on Noah's Ark and you couldn't feed them and look after them? Is that about your question? Well, if you do a careful study on genetics, and I've done that, like I say, I'm going on 100. I kept fairly busy. All you needed was 1,200 animals to produce what we have today, and for the size boat that was. And let me say this, folks, the tragedy of the whole thing is that there was room for a whole lot of people on there. And they didn't get on, and that is a tragedy. We don't want to make the same mistake. We're in a similar situation on this planet.
You mentioned the 8 crosses on the anchor. Have been 8 crosses before Jesus?
Okay, good question. The 8 crosses, how come they're on Noah's Ark's anchor stones? The answer to that is that these were put on there by Byzantine Christians about the 4th century A.D. On the film, I said 3rd century. I forgot that, you go call the century ahead of the number instead of behind it. And then also Crusaders. So they recognized these as relics from Noah's Ark. Now, we found 13 of these stones all together, and we found 3 that were buried in the mud that buried Noah's Ark, and there's nothing on them. Thank you. That's being observant there.
This is the centre.
Now, he's had a question.
We're going to come back to it. I know you've got one.
Yeah.
Okay. You, sir.
Yes, I've got a little question. When you mention about Noah's Ark, most people think of the civilization around the time of Noah as simple. Now, at what stage in civilization would it be, would you have to have to reproduce something like Noah's Ark today? 17th, 18th century?
Okay. What he's asking is, a lot of people assume that because Noah lived a long time ago, and everybody knows that we descended from monkeys and drug our wives around by the hair of the head and had bones through our nose and our ears and our hair and who knows where else. And this would cause to mind where people put things in their bodies today, like rings and other objects. And but anyway, when in the modern era did man reach the skill level where they could build a boat the size of Noah's Ark? Well, Well, the fact of the matter is it was 1886 before someone actually built a boat that size. I'm not saying they didn't reach the skill level prior to that, but that's when the first one was built. Thank you.
Shortly after Noah's Ark, you have the Tower of Babel. What's the distance between the two sites?
All right. Shortly after Noah's Ark, the next thing mentioned in the Bible, and that's in chapter 11 of Genesis. We read this, and it amazes me, but once again, God has all of this on a timetable. That's why somebody didn't figure these things out. But in the 11th chapter of Genesis, it says, as they journeyed from the east, that meant they were going west. Well, everybody else has concluded that the Tower of Babel was by Babylon, which is directly south of Noah's Ark. That's not what the Bible said. So anyway, we went west from there, found the remains of the Tower of Babel, have an infrared satellite image of it, and a poster, which I didn't bring with me, because we can only cover so many subjects, on these short menus. But anyway, the distance between the two is approximately 180 miles. It appears that they followed the tributaries of the Euphrates River. And it says that they came to a plain in the land of Shinar, and there they dwelled, and there they built the city with the tower. And so it's built right on in a real sharp curve in the Euphrates River. And at some point, we may show that. I'd like to have a little more documentation. We've dug out the bricks and some other things, and it was put together with baked bricks and with tar, real thick tar mixed with clay was what was used for mortar. And we have some other information on it, but again, we won't get into that too heavily here this trip.
Okay, yes, gentlemen.
That sort of leads into my question a bit. You talk about God's timetable, which is naturally the Bible. And, my question is, you talk about God's timing. Well, in your opinion, with these discoveries you're making, and I am a believer, and I do commend you on your work, and really, why you, why now? Is God telling us something here, or what's going on? Why all these discoveries at this point in time?
Okay. That's a fair question. All right, what he's basically saying is, why now? Why is it suddenly God's time to reveal all of these things? Oh, did he ask that? I was hoping I could ignore that. Okay, why me? When these people say that no one human being could find all of these things, they're absolutely right. All right? There's no way that any one human being could find them on his own. God revealed these things, and the Bible is quite clear on that subject. He says he uses these simple things. And you're looking at a simple thing, and I'm quite happy that that's the case. Now, as to the rest of the question, don't interrupt. You'll get your time. You're actually trying to help me?
Yes.
All right, please.
The Bible says that other than Jesus Christ, the greatest individual in the Bible, the most documented, the best known in the history of the Bible is Moses. Would that be a fair statement?
I believe so.
The Bible says that he was the meekest man on earth. Right?
Okay.
Here we go. God selected the meekest man on earth to play the greatest role, second to Jesus Christ in the Bible. Therefore, it is not surprising that he would select Ron Wyatt to do what Ron Wyatt is doing.
I appreciate that kind thought, sir, very much. The rest of the question is, how come now? The Soviet Union had developed 200 satchel charges. They were approximately the size of that projector there, with nuclear weapons that were equivalent to 20 megatons, right? All of those have vanished. Their scientists, when they stopped getting paid, started selling off nuclear weapons and other things. And of course, the Muslim community with all their oil money were there to buy them. Now then, you may or may not be aware that young Muslims from the time they're children are taught that if they die while killing infidels, they go straight to heaven and they get a lot of things that little Muslim boys and girls want to have. And this is why we have suicide bombers in the Muslim community, is because they believe this. And if I'd been taught that and nobody to tell me better, I wouldn't believe it. So I'm not bad-mouthing them. But all of these things are in the hands of these kind of people, plus there's a lot of nuclear missiles that were in some of the republics that made up the Soviet Union, and these republics are Muslim. And so they now have control of this. Now, the story you and I are told by, the higher-ups is that nobody can actually fire their missile without somebody way up there does something. The fact of the matter is that every field commander knows how to fire his missile without any help from anybody else. So folks, based on that and all of the biological warfare possibilities that are going on, AIDS and other things that we have done to ourselves, this planet, the inhabitants of this planet are on the verge of self-destruct. And God says, I will come and destroy them that destroy the earth. So he's going to show up before we manage to self-destruct. And he's got to do that right soon. Now then, for years missionaries have gone out and they've done wonderful work. But it takes an average of about 6 months per conversion. That don't work too well when you're having people born at the rate we're having them now. Like I said earlier, people do make babies. And they're being born and dying at a much faster rate than missionaries can get out there. So God has brought out all of this so that he can do a show and tell presentation of the facts. And this cuts through religious prejudices, national prejudices, color prejudices, and language barriers, because a picture speaks to you in your own language. And so that's what God is doing at this point in time. And these videos, posters, and pictures are being used all over the world. And people are being won at an unbelievable rate. I get calls about this. We don't usually say too much about that because God didn't want Israel numbered, and I certainly don't intend to keep tabs on the number of people that are brought to Christ by these revelations that God has made, but it's happening very, very quickly. So this is why I share this and encourage other people to share it with those who they would like to, learn what the truth is. Okay, how are we doing?
Well, we're well over time, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then back to 4.
Have you any thoughts on carbon dating?
Do I have any thoughts on carbon dating? I do have. It's totally unreliable. And so is uranium-230. All forms of radioactive dating is invalid. The reason is, the basis of it is they claim that the rate of radioactive decay cannot be influenced by outside forces such as heat or cold or water or any of that. If that were true, we could not have nuclear bombs. We could not have nuclear power plants. Just to give you some idea of how inaccurate they are, right after World War II, when the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the headlines all over the world were that leading, eminent scientists state that no one will be able to live in those cities for at least 250,000 years, because that's the half-life, of uranium-238 according to their calculations. Well, they were wrong by 250,000 years. And so there's not much to be learned by carbon-14 or any other
give you signs that you're correct?
All right. He's saying that for hundreds of years or 100 years or something of that nature, people have been trying to make these discoveries and documentation. Did God speak to me?
Gave you a sign or whatever?
Or whatever.
The right path, you're digging in the right place.
Yeah.
Or not.
Okay. Hopefully you can come back, a few more nights, especially for Tuesday night, the Ark of the Covenant one. I have had a lot of divine guidance on finding these, and I don't blush when I say that. I believe that all of you out here, you were intelligent enough to get here tonight, and so you're intelligent enough to know that I could not have found these things without a lot of help. And so yes, we did get a lot of help. However, God the Father hasn't spoken to me audibly. God the Son has. But we won't elaborate on that tonight. We will Tuesday evening.
I believe the story. I'm not opposed in any way, but I'm mystified as to why the Turkish government in the last 10 years, or somebody other than you, hasn't dug a hole, and a sensible hole, not a destructive one, and actually got down there and shown things and brought it out to the world.
Okay, sir. Now, what he's saying is that he's mystified why the Turkish government or somebody, like some university, all these people, who claim to want to find out things and investigate things, why haven't they gone out and done a careful excavation? Is that approximately what you're saying? And folks, that's not too much to ask if these people are really what they say they are. Now, I do know why the Turkish government hasn't done it. They told me when they gave me the permit to excavate, they said, I asked them, I said, why don't you get some of your own people to excavate it, like those out at Ataturk University in Erzurum? And they said, well, when we give those people money to do something with, he says, the money goes, but nothing gets done. And so that's why, that hasn't happened. But why other people, well, a good question to add to that is why do these creationists continue to raise money to go look for Noah's Ark when it's found? Now, I want to ask you a question. If two people come here or wherever to your home or whatever, and one of them says, I found something, and shows you pictures and proof that they've actually found it, and they want some money to excavate it, and another person shows up and say, I want to go look for something, and I have all these stories, and I don't have any proof that these stories are true, but I would like you to give me some money to go look for it. Which one of those would you be more likely to give your money to the one who had found something and wanted to dig it up? Can I ask you to hold your hand up if that's the case? All right. How many had rather give their money to the fellow who really